So we're going to go over UI UX with Figma. This will be an interactive session on how to use Figma and a little bit of intel on design in the industry. So just an overview of what we're going to go over: UI UX itself, the actual design process that designers follow in industry and in practice, a brief Figma overview 101, and kind of how design and engineering interconnect in the real industry. And then we're just going to spend the rest of our time together on Figma itself. So let's go ahead and get started. What is UI UX? We're going to learn a little bit more about user interfaces and user experience. So I would say UI UX have become brief, like hot topics over the past few years. Not hot topic, buzzwords, that's the word, because people like to say it, but they don't really know. They know what it means, but they don't really know what it entails. So just to give you a very simple explanation of it, UI, or user interfaces, are what the user actually sees when they're interacting with your application, which makes sense because an interface is something you're looking at. It's the face of an application. User experience is what a user experiences when they're interacting with your application. So things that a lot of people don't think of, that is user experience. How many times does somebody have to click a button to get to a certain page? How long does it take to scroll to the bottom of your page? How accessible is your website? How does the color contrasting look? Like all of these different things, it matters a lot in user experience. And user experience is literally the core of an application. People do not want to use your website if it's horrible to use and it's unmanageable and it's very frustrating. And people don't want to use your website if it looks horrible and it's very ugly, it doesn't look very modern or updated. So you can kind of see how both of these things, they rely very heavily on one another and they can't live without each other. And this is kind of what people who develop UIs for websites focus on, is UI UX. The next part is the design process. So how does the actual design process work? And what I'm talking about when I say design process is, how do you create anything? Like, how do you create a UI for an app or a website? How do you literally make a visual for anything at all? And this is kind of the standard process that designers follow. At the very beginning, and of course, all of this is post idea, like you have an idea in mind, you know what you want to do. And say, for example, oh, I really want to build an app that is a dating profile for my dog. I made that up. That was really bad. Sorry. But if that was your idea, for example, then you're like, okay, how do I visualize this? How do I want it to look? The first thing that UI developers do and designers do is they create the low fidelity wireframes of their application. Low fidelity is specifically the functionality of your application. And I also will call it lo-fi for short, because a lot of people just call it lo-fi. But lo-fi is the functionality of your application. You're focusing on how it works. You're not focusing on the beautifulness of it. When you're creating these lo-fi wireframes, you're literally looking at bare bones. On this screen, I want a picture here and I want a button here. On this screen, I want this functionality and this functionality. You're not focusing on how these icons look and the padding and the positioning and the coloring. You don't care about all of that stuff. What you care about is the functionality of it. And this is super important, especially for a hackathon project, because you want to make sure the functionality of your application, whatever you build, if it's mobile, if it's web, you want to make sure it makes sense. You want to make sure there's a button on one screen that goes somewhere on the other screen. You don't want there to just be a button and it does nothing. Or you don't want there to not be a button and there's supposed to be, because you're supposed to do something. You see what I mean? So lo-fi is literally the functionality on every single screen or every single page of your application. How do you want it to work at the core of it? After that, after you kind of hone down what your lo-fi looks like, you can go into high fidelity. And hi-fi is the fun part. It's the visuals. It's what makes everything look beautiful. You can decide what color scheme you want and the typography. And that's kind of when you start integrating those different things. And you can refine your components. This also provides an opportunity for you to look at the functionality of your components and say, oh, I actually don't think a button really fits here. Let's move it in this different place, and things like that. This is where you can put icons instead of words for your menu. You can put a literal like hamburger menu, things like that. That makes it look pretty. And with high fidelity applications or high fidelity designs, they're intended to closely replicate the end product of your application. So this process takes a very long time. It's not very simple to go from functionality to refining it and prettifying it, because high fidelity in industry takes a long time. There's a lot of people to talk to. There's a lot of iterations of the same design over and over and over. in my senior design class, I'm the UI designer for our application right now. And we're literally like on our fifth iteration of the same screen because every time I go to my team with a new design, they're like, oh, what if we adjust this very slightly? And I have to make that adjustment again. So imagine that, but times 10 in companies over and over and over. So hi-fi takes a very long time, but it's intended. You're literally creating the design that you want to be the end goal. And the last part is prototyping, which in my opinion is the most fun part, but for some people it's the most difficult. Prototyping is making your design interactive. This is literally allowing you look at your design on Figma and you click a button on your design, you've made a button, so you click it and it literally goes to the next screen on its own. That's what prototyping does. It literally puts motion into your design. And that all it does is really enforce how it's really intended to be used in the real world, especially if you're making an application like a website or a web app or a desktop application, anything like that. It's very helpful to make prototypes on Figma because very quickly you realize small gaps that you would have fallen into. Like if a user clicked to go to this page, you realize there's no back button. That's something you need to implement. And that's something that's harder to realize when you're just looking at static designs versus when you've made prototypes and you're going through the real flow like an actual user would. It's very easy to realize, oh, we're missing this thing and this thing and this thing. So yeah, when you click a button, does it go to the right page? It should. Literally, when you click a button on your design, does it go to the right page? That's prototyping. So here's a brief visual of kind of what I'm talking about, because I know it can be a little bit confusing, but you can see with lo-fi, it's mostly grayscale. It's very plain shapes. It's actually very common for when using pictures for logos and placeholders. It's just the square or a circle with an X to indicate that an image goes there. And then you can kind of see like the lines with where there's text supposed to be. A button is black just to be a different color. It's very lo-fi. And then you see on the right-hand side where you see hi-fi, it's very beautiful. You can see the logo's been implemented, the icon's been changed. There's some text above the icon right here. Oh God, sorry, I didn't mean to change that. There's some text above the icon right here. That's something that's been iterated on from the lo-fi. There wasn't that before, you know? So you can kind of see they've rounded the edges of their input fields and things like that. In their map, like you can see this is literally a drawing of a map, but with the hi-fi, it's not a real life implemented because it's hi-fi, but it's probably rendered from offline or somewhere like that. So you can kind of more clearly see the difference between lo-fi and hi-fi, and it's very important to make sure you understand the functionality of your app before you just jump into making it look pretty and beautiful, because you're going to miss some things. All right, so the next thing that we want to talk about is just Figma 101. This is kind of just to prove your case on why you should use Figma, not only for this hackathon project, but it really is very simple to use. And once you understand Figma, I would highly suggest look into other applications like Adobe XD that was mentioned in the chat earlier. These are just different platforms that allow you to do these same exact things, developing lo-fis, hi-fis, and prototypes and stuff like that. But the very basics of Figma, how Figma works, because I don't want to spoil it before we get into our interaction, it basically allows you to make the lo-fis, the hi-fis, and the prototypes all within one platform, which makes it very beneficial, especially for beginners and beginner teams. And if you guys are trying to work quickly, you know, it's a hackathon, you want to develop a prototype, a visual of your application very fast. This website makes it very easy to just do all of that on one platform. And it's very simple to use. And it's just good for beginners who literally don't know what you're doing. Because after this workshop, hopefully you will know exactly what you're doing. All right, and then the last thing that I want to cover is design and engineering and how they correlate. I want to bring this up just because sometimes a lot of people are like, I really love design, but I'm like a computer science major, which is me. I'm a computer science major and I really love design. And for the longest time, I was like, design does not belong in engineering. But after my internship, I realized it definitely does. And the reason I realized that is because I was working on a product facing team. And what that means is you're working on the team that's not really working on back end stuff. You're working on things that the client sees. So every push that I was making on our repository is something that users would wake up tomorrow and they would see on their phones. And that means you're working on a product facing team. So designers interact with these engineers way more than you think. And I don't know why people don't talk about it that often. They really make it seem like design and engineering are two different things when really they overlap so much, especially in the industry. Engineers literally dictate whether a design can be implemented or not because they're the ones who have to implement it. And the designers are the ones who know best what UI and UX experiences are better for their users. So Yeah, so just understanding, like, specifically on product-facing teams, they interact with product designers the most, but you actually get a lot of interaction with designers and engineers no matter where you go, as long as you are on one of the teams that actually works on something that people are dealing with. So the term that's actually used in the industry when designers are finished with their designs and they're ready to hand it off to engineers, it's literally called design handoff. So when you think of it in your hackathon project, kind of think of it as, okay, now that we have this design, how are we going to implement it into code? But in the industry, it's like, oh, the designers are done and they're like, okay, we're done, and we hand it off to the engineers and they kind of figure out how to implement it into their code. But on your guys's case, you're going to be in your hackathon teams and you're going to be designing your designs, and now you're going to be like, okay, great, this is how it's supposed to look. Now, how do we actually implement it in real life? And just some names for you guys, if you wanted to look this up later, what somebody who does code and like design would actually be called. Some common names are UI developers and UX developers and front end developers. Hello, because you're literally working on the front end. These are the kind of roles that end up having a lot of interaction with making designs and making visuals and stuff like that, and still getting to code it and still getting to implement it, which is personally what I love the most, is being able to design something and implement it on my own. I really love that. Okay, and I think that's it. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this share. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drop the link where we're going to do, actually, before I do that, yeah, actually, let me give you guys the link. I'm going to give you guys the link and you guys can go ahead and join it. It's okay. I think it's okay if you didn't make a Figma account for this, because I'm pretty sure it'll let you just do it as guest. Now, let me share this link, copy link. I'm going to paste it in the chat right here. And whenever you guys want, you can go ahead and click that link. And I'm probably going to see you pop up. Let me go ahead and share this tab as well. Window, this one. Yay! Okay, I'm seeing you guys. So you guys can just wiggle around. I see y'all. Okay, perfect. There's a bunch of you guys. Okay, this is going to go great. So you guys are on Figma right now. I do want to give a backup real quick. If you've never used Figma before, you're currently in a Figma page. But if you've literally never used it before, let's go from the home page to this page so you know exactly what to do when you're doing this on your own. Let's see. I want to do this one. Yeah. Okay, so when you make a Figma account and you log in, you're not going to have everything that I'm having right now. You're just seeing all these different things because I have a lot of Figma files, but you're probably not going to see anything on this homepage right here. This is basically where all of your Figma pages will exist. So when you're logging into your Figma, when you create your Figma for the first time and you want to make a new design file, you would literally just click on the right-hand side, the design file. So you would click that and it would take you to this beautiful view where it's literally just nothing on your screen. So that's kind of what you were looking at when you guys click that interactive session. That's where you are right now. So I'm going to go stop share and I'm going to reshare on the page that we're all together on so that we can get started. Okay, so it seems like a lot of you guys are on here. That's perfect. Again, if you don't know where we are right now, go ahead and click the link that I pasted in the chat. This is the Figma file that we're going to be following. All right, let me go ahead and pull up my list. Alrighty, so if you guys are looking at my screen, that's even better, but if you're looking at yours, that's okay too. I support you. But what you see here is a few things. On the left-hand side, there's this very long panel. Okay, okay, we're gonna draw stuff. Don't draw stuff yet, because it will mess with the left-hand side. But I support the enthusiasm, I promise. But on the left-hand side, you can kind of see this thing where it says layers. And you can see this thing where it says assets. Assets doesn't matter to you much right now, and layers will when we start putting stuff on this page. But something I want to note here is kind of where I say lo-fi. If you see this drop down, you can see pages. Originally, it would say I think it would say page. Yeah, it would say page 1 if you had nothing. But this is to kind of show you that you can make multiple pages on your Figma file. So if I just want to have one page of lo-fis and another page of hi-fis, that allows me to have one page that all of you guys were on. But if I were to switch to hi-fi, all of a sudden you guys are not here. You could also switch to the hi-fi page and you'd also be there. But that kind of allows you to have 2 separate spaces where you can develop anything you want and design whatever you want. So that's the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you can kind of see 3 separate tabs. The first one being design, second one being prototype, and the third one being inspect. So the ones that matter the most here are design and prototype. Design you're going to understand a little bit more in a second, and prototype is literally when you're ready to create prototypes of your application. And we're about to get into the fun part. At the very top, you can kind of see these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different tabs. The ones that I care about the most are frame, the square, which represents the shapes, the pen tools, text, and comments. So to go from least boring or most boring to most exciting, the text tool, if you click it, and you guys are free to click it, you can literally just put in text. That's literally what it is. It just allows you to click it and put text anywhere you want. And the next thing that is pretty boring is the pen tool. You can click the drop down and you can either play with a pen or a pencil. Pen, all it does is allow you to make long, straight lines. That's literally it. And with the pencil, you can kind of do whatever you want, but it's not very helpful in my opinion. I don't like it very much. But you can like make sort of crooked lines and it will try and smooth them out for you. This is sort of if you're trying to like sketch very quickly. I don't use it very often because I have shaky hands, but if you guys are better than me at it, then that's what matters. And the next least boring thing is the frame right here. So I would say frame is extremely important. And the reason why frame is important is if you click frame and you look to the right-hand side, you can already see it has phone, tablet, desktop, which is the one it defaults to open up, presentation, watch, paper, social media, all of this stuff. And the reason why this is so beneficial is if I were to click one of these frames, immediately I'm given a platform where I can just view everything. Like everything that I'm looking at is the dimensions of a desktop. If I didn't want that one and I go back to frame, I could say, oh, I want the MacBook dimensions. It would give me that instead. If I'm designing for a phone, I could go back to frame and I click phone and I could say I want to design for an iPhone Pro Max. So the frame is extremely, extremely helpful because it allows you to literally have the dimensions of the platform that you're designing for so that you know exactly the width and the size that you're designing for. Does that make sense so far, everybody? Before we start designing, those tabs, the left-hand side, the right-hand side, and the buttons at the top, is it making sense? You can just put in the chat. It looks like you guys are getting it. Okay, yes. Okay. It looks like you guys are definitely getting it. Okay. Does it not support specific Android devices? Let's see. I've actually never ventured into that. It looks like Android, Google Pixel 2 XL, Google Pixel 2 it supports. I would argue a reason that it may not support a lot of extensive Androids is because the dimensions are relatively the same for the iPhone ones, and design for iPhone is done more often. So that's something that I would think of. But it's making sense to y'all. Okay, perfect. Okay, so that's kind of how these frames work. Now let's get into the actual fun part. Imagine we actually do want to, and no offense to you guys, but I'm literally deleting everything you guys are doing just because I want to show you something. Okay, so imagine we are going to make a phone app. So you guys can go ahead and go to frame and you can pick whatever phone dimension that you want. What I want to show you guys here is how you can make designs for a phone. Say, for example, we're starting with lo-fi because you guys are good designers, you're going to start with lo-fi. And we want this to be the home page of our application. Oh, also spoiler alert, it's the same way to copy and paste things. If you want to copy and paste something, you can click the name of the frame, and in Mac at least, it's just Command C and then Command V, and it will paste it literally right next to it, which is actually very helpful because it allows you to just over and over have the same exact phone copy nonstop, but you can just like take it and paste it, move it around, all of that stuff. But basically, if we were looking at this phone dimension and we were like, okay, great. Well, on this phone dimension, I want to add, let's say, let me see. I want to add a home page, a home button. I want to add a button that says login, right? This is where shapes come in. Shapes are the third icon at the top, and there's multiple shapes that Figma provides: rectangle, line, arrow, ellipses, literally all of these. The one that I use the most is rectangle, just because it's easy to make a lot of things with rectangle. But I'm going to go ahead and pull it out. And you can kind of see it changes my pointer to that cross thing. And I can make this rectangle however big I would like it to be. I think an ideal button size, so I'm just going to make it something like this. And now you can kind of see I have a button on my site. And maybe I also want like a logo. So I'm going to copy and paste this. And now I just have another square, and maybe at the top I'll like make a logo. And remember when I said in lo-fi traditionally people use the X lines over where they want images, where I could go to shapes and I could go to line, zoom in a little, and I could have it go from the top to the bottom and kind of utilize these frames where it's kind of pointing me in the right direction. You see on the left-hand side this red line, on the top this red line, and when I go right in the corner, it highlights them both. That means I met right in the middle, and I could just drag another line if I wanted to. So click to line and then go from this side to the end, and now I've just got another icon. And these are just very boring things, but you kind of see how I can literally make any shapes that I wanted to here. If I wanted to have another quote unquote button, I can move one up here, another one, I can copy paste that, move that down here, for example. And then maybe right here, I'm gonna instead do an ellipses for a circle, just to indicate like a face or whatever. So here's something, looking at this is very basic and boring and plain. But this is already a first step in making your visual for your application. And now you can use the text tool to literally put text anywhere you want. And maybe now I could say login. So this is kind of going to introduce us more to our right-hand panel. The right-hand panel is where you can control everything about your shapes and designs. When it's a text block, you can control the size of your text, how big it is, the font that you're using, the font weight that you're using, everything. When we're looking at shapes, you can control the drop shadow on it, the rounded edges, and things like that. So let's play with text first, and then we're going to play with the shapes. So if I were to highlight this text in my box right now, and you guys can feel free to have text wherever you want, highlight over it, and on the right-hand side where it says text, go ahead and change your font to whatever you want. I'll do like something lame, something like secular 1, yeah. And then you can change the font size to whatever you want it to be as well. It has default font sizes, but you can literally make it whatever you want. So this is an inputable field. Like I could say 55 if I wanted to, and it would do that. Something helpful to note with Figma is when you create a text box of any size, it's going to keep that dimension until you tell it to change. So with this, if I were to make my text size like 70, it already drops it down. And that's because my text box is only this width. If I wanted to automatically customize to the size of the text that I'm putting in it, this first choice right here where it says auto width, it automatically determines the width based off of the size. This is very helpful. Or if you're doing paragraphs, this middle one where it says auto height, it determines the height of your text and it adjusts the text box for you. So that's always very helpful. So here you've already changed the text that you have and the size of the text. Maybe we want to change the color. Where it says fill, you can click that black color and you can literally make it whatever you want. So you can change anything here to be whatever color you would like it to be. To change the actual size of this, instead of having to bother with your font weight or font size all of the time, you can click this little box that this text exists in. And if you guys notice, at the very first icon here is a mouse. And when I click down, it says scale. Mouse or move and scale are very important, and scale is so helpful when you're trying to rapidly resize things without needing to adjust all 4 corners. So if I were to hit scale and move these 4 corners, you can see that it keeps the dimensions of my login text. If I were to do this with move, all it's going to do is like move around this text, and it's very sloppy. It's not very helpful. I don't want it to do that. With scale, it keeps the dimensions and it scales it to the size that I want it to be. So now I can scale it down to a little bit more, maybe move it to the center of this rectangle. Something that's also very important to note is you can do the same thing with shapes. So if I were resizing this shape size with just a move, then it would be moving like the tops and the bottoms. It wouldn't be keeping the dimensions of anything. But if I were to moving it with scale, then it's going to keep the dimensions of this rectangle, just make it smaller or larger based off of what I want. Is that making sense so far? Yeah, it looks like you guys are having fun. Perfect. Okay. Also, wait, let me make sure it's like showing me. Not me, but like me as in my head. Anyway. Okay, because I think it was like not showing. There you go. Okay, so anyways, yeah, so this is kind of helping us with resizing everything in the way that we want it to be. It can be super small, it can be really big if we want, but it keeps those dimensions of the rectangle that we predetermined. The same way that we were able to customize the font color and the size of our text is the same way that we're going to be able to customize the sizing and the coloring and the effects of our shapes. So on the right-hand side where you see fill, I could change that to literally be whatever I want it to be. If you have a specific color scheme, you can change this from being RGB to being a hex code, and you could paste in the exact hex code that you want. Instead of using those, you could use RGB, CSS, I don't know, but that's literally just pasting in the RGBA values. And then HSL, you could do those if you know them, HSB. These are all just different ways to interpret colors in technology. But yeah, so this is different ways for you to choose whatever color you want it to be. You would go to fill and you would select whatever color you want. And then another really cool thing about these, on the right-hand side, you kind of see stroke. Stroke is giving something a border. So when I select stroke, you can see by default, it will always do this. It will give you a stroke of width 1 in color black. But you can, of course, change that stroke to be whatever you would like it to be. And you can make that stroke much bigger, like 8, for example, or much smaller, like 0.2, whatever you would like it to be. Personally, I don't like strokes, but that's fine if you do, especially if it matches your application, then you should do it. But that's just a very simple thing that you can include. By the way, if you don't want something, you can just click the minus. It's as simple as that. Another really cool thing about this is effects. So you can see the default effect when you click effects is to give something a drop shadow. That looks beautiful, in my opinion. I think it looks really cool. But you can change this effect to be something that's not a drop shadow. You could say, I want an inner shadow instead. Or I want a layer blur, which makes it blurred on the layer. Or a background blur, which blurs the background, which you can't really tell right now because the background is white. But these are just different basic effects that you can give to your shapes. And it's the same thing that you can do with your text. So if we go to our text and we go to our stroke, we can give our text a stroke as well. We can make that really thick if we wanted to, or we can make it 0.2 to make it super, super small, anything that we wanted. And we can change the color. Maybe I want it to be like white and I want a stroke of 3 or something like that. And you can also include an effect to your text. So you can give it a drop shadow, or you could give it something like a layer shadow, or inner shadow, sorry, or a layer blur, you know, things like that. Literally anything that you wanted to do. So these are all just very basic ways of customizing the things that you're putting onto your screen. So if we look at our left-hand side now, where we're looking at layers, you can see all of the work that you guys are doing. This allows you to rapidly jump around your designs. Instead of having to zoom out and see everything that's being done, you can jump around with this itself. And you can say, oh, what is this intended to be? And it will literally highlight the element for you. So things like that. It's very, very beneficial, very helpful. Okay, and then what do I want to go for next? Oh yeah, comments. Okay, so this is very beneficial. Before I get into making things actually look good on here, something that is very helpful, especially with your hackathon team, if you, for example, are assigned with designing and you are the person that's making these lo-fis and stuff, you can allow your teammates to leave comments on your designs. Or if you guys are all collaboratively working together on your designs and you're looking at somebody else's and you want to leave a comment, literally the last icon here is a comment. So if you click that, you can literally just click wherever you'd like. It opens up this little comment box and you can say something like, looks great, and hit post. And they'll see that whenever they come back here. When you click off of comments, it doesn't show it anymore, which allows you to work wherever you need to. But when you click comments, it will show all of the comments that exist on your page. So you guys can feel free to make comments on other people's, make comments on yours, whatever you'd like. And this kind of allows you to revisit your design or give your design to your teammates, work on something else while they're working on leaving comments on your work. It just makes it very cohesive and simple. Mine is the best, sorry. Honestly, not gonna lie, yours is the best. Like, I actually can't lie. Okay, so that's pretty much the basics of using shapes and everything like that on Figma. So you literally can make whatever you would like. And this is more of something that's lo-fi, but when you start getting into hi-fi, there's a few beneficial things that Figma provides. One of my favorite things about Figma, and I'm gonna make a different frame for this, I'll just do like iPhone X, even though it's a different dimension. So for example, if I know my application and I know maybe this color right here, the CO7676, this is part of my color scheme. And I want all of my, oh my God, and I want all of my buttons to be this color scheme. When I go to my fill, I don't want to have to drag around and find it every time. And I don't want to have to search through these document colors every time, because what happens with document colors, it's literally collecting all of the colors that exist on your page and it's just putting them there. And it's saying, these are all the colors that exist in your document. This is very hard to follow, especially when you're making a lot of designs or if you're doing a lot of different colors and you know, for example, you know you want this color to be a part of your color scheme. You can create your own color palette in Figma. The way that you do that is you would go to fill and you click this check. No, you click this the squares, not squares. What are these called? The pills, like the 4 dots. It's called a style, but it's the cube. So anyway, you would click that and it's called color styles. At the right hand side of color styles, you would click that plus mark and it says create new color style. So I could name this whatever I want, but I'm going to say button and I'll say create style. So now when I'm looking at this, it's no longer the hex code of the color, it's the name that I provided it, button. And if I were to make another rectangle, for example, let's just make one right here, and I click the fill, instead of looking at document colors, no, this isn't it. Oh, no, yeah. Instead of looking at document colors, where is it? Oh God, oh my God, I'm breaking everything. Oh my God. I'm literally breaking everything. Oh wait, did I not save it? Button. Yeah, color styles button. Yeah, there it is. Anyway, sorry. So basically, if you want to use the color style that you've created, you would go back to that style thing, and the color styles that you've made for your color palette would show up first. So I could say button, and it would immediately assign that same hex code and hex coloring to my rectangle. So that just allows you to not need to search for the colors every single time, not need to copy and paste the hex code every single time. When you save the color to your color styles, it'll always be there. And I'm going to do another example, so just so you guys like really understand what I was doing. If I wanted to do, instead of that same color, maybe I'll do like, oh, I know what I'll do. So maybe for the circle, I always want it to be a fill of like the shade of blue. Then I would just go to these 4 dots where it's called style, and then I would click this plus on the right-hand side of color styles, and I would name it whatever I want. Icon, for example, I would hit create style, and then it will always be there. Where you see underneath button, it says icon. So my color palette is always there. So that's very beneficial for always having the same colors, makes it much easier instead of needing to guess what colors they are from your document styles, things like that. All right, I also want to go over components. Okay, so creating components is very beneficial. And the reason it's beneficial is because when you're creating your websites or your mobile applications, you are making multiple screens. And you may not realize this right now, but especially if you're making a mobile app, for example, you may not realize this, but you are easily going to have like 10 different screens for like one interaction. Like when somebody is messing with like the nav bar, for example, and they click the home page, you're going to need to show them the home page. And when they click something on the home page, you're going to need to show them something else. When they click the back button, you're going to need them to go back to the back button. So like, it's way too much. Like it's actually a lot of stuff. And especially when you're making mobile applications and you don't want to have to literally, okay, so let me give you guys a good example. So if I were to have, I'm just going to remove all of this. And I know that this is my login page. And maybe once they log in, they go to their home page. So I'm just going to say, oh, this is on your home page. And I also want this same component to be on this screen, but instead of login, it says sign in. And again, you can change this to customize to auto with. So it says something like this. And say, for example, you're doing this over and over, you're copying these same things over and over and over, and you accidentally just make this a little bit bigger. Or maybe you want this to be a little bit bigger on every single page. Now you have to go back to log in and also make this bigger. Or you can like delete it, but copy and paste it here and like take it again. But now you have to like adjust send it backward. Like it's a lot of work. When you want the same exact view on every single page and you want something to slightly change, you want it to be reflected for all of the pages. So one thing that I'm going to show you guys here is grouping. So right now, if I look at my login, it's its own text block. And if I look at this rectangle behind it, it's its own rectangular block. But if I move one of these, it's going to leave the other one alone. If I move the text, it'll leave the other one alone. I always want them to move together. So in order to do that, you can group your elements. So I can click this first one, login, and then for Mac, I'm on Mac, so I click Shift and I click the box behind it. Automatically, it's selected both of them, and you can tell if you look at the left-hand side at your layers where it highlights login and it highlights rectangle. Now that you have whatever you want grouped highlighted, you Command G for Mac, Command G, and that's how you group them together. Now, if I were to move this, it's always going to stay together, always. So now I can delete this, and now I know that this is going to move together forever. I can copy and paste it, and this is always going to be the same. It's always going to move together. Is it making sense so far? We're almost 20 minutes in. Where do we go to create color styles? Does mine look okay? Let me go over color styles real quick one more time. It makes hella sense. Okay, that's great. Okay, so creating color styles, you would go, let's say, for example, this circle, we want it to be a different color, so we go to fill, and maybe we want it to be bright yellow, because yellow is my favorite color. Not this shade of yellow, though. Like this shade of yellow. Anyway, so we would go to fill, we would select whatever color we want, and these 4 buttons, not buttons, it's like 4 dots in like a cubic style. It says style. You would click that, and then where it says color styles, to the far right hand side, it has a plus. It says create style. So you would select that. You could name it whatever you want. I'm just going to call it favorite. Nice spell. And then you click create style. And now if you were to look at your color styles, you can see button, icon, favorite. This is where all of your color styles would exist. Does that make sense? We can't see what you do in the menus. What? Why not? Oh, is it because it's a pop-up it doesn't show you? I wonder if I show you my full screen. Hold on. Let's just do entire screen. Okay, so let me do it one more time and then I'll go back to the chat. So this is fill. I'm gonna click the fill here. Green, maybe like dark green. Okay, did that pop-up show up or no? Yay, it's working. Okay, so I guess I have to do full screen. Sorry. Okay, so basically, let me recap styles one more time. I would just click whatever I want. Under fill, you can change it to be whatever color you want it to be. And once you're happy with your color and you're like, I want this color in our color palette for ease of access, you click those 4 squares right there, the style, and then it would pop up with this color styles menu. On the right-hand side, you would click create style. You could name it whatever you want. So I could say forest green, and then I would say create style. And now whenever I'm looking at my colors, I always have my same color palette here. And this makes it very easy if I were to look at something like this and I want to change this background. I click this fill. I wonder if it will, yes, okay, it shows up. So what it gives you is a local directory of your local colors, and it shows you only the colors that you've created to add to your color palette. So this is much better than using document colors, because again, document colors is just encompassing everything that it wants to, but your local colors is only what you've decided to add to your color palette. So now it's very easy for me to say I want this to be yellow, or it's very easy for me to say I want this to be that color that I chose, whatever I named it, I don't remember, or this beautiful one that somebody just made on their own. So it's very easy to change your colors and always have a consistent pool of colors of your own. And actually, okay, I'm really glad that you guys are playing with this, because you can customize these colors. It doesn't have to be full transparency. You can modify the opacity of the colors that you're playing with. So it can literally just be 100%, or you can change it to be 8% and 10%. Just play around with variations of colors. It's very simple. Okay, so now we can get into components. Now that I've shown you guys grouping, so again, when you want to group 2 things together, it's so that they don't leave one another. And if you want to ungroup things, that's okay. You would just, I think for me, it's like Command Shift G, that's what undoes it. And that's, again, I'm on a Mac, so it could be different for you. Again, the way that you would just find these, you could just right click and it would tell you exactly what to do. So if you right click, you can just click group selection. If you don't want to do the keyboard shortcut for any of them, that's fine. Okay, so now for components. Okay, so the reason why components are extremely helpful is because you honestly, you want to make a style once, and you don't want to have to modify every single instance of that style when you want to change one thing about it. So say, for example, we have this on every page. And let me So we have this like little green thing on every page. If I wanted to change it on this page and make it a little bit bigger, I'm going to have to go here and change it to make it a little bit bigger here as well. What I could do instead is I could just make a component of this. So I'm just going to drag it out here, and I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to say create component. It's called rectangle 3, but I could really name it whatever I want. So I'm just going to say static button. So it'll always be called static button. It highlights purple when it's a component, so that's how you know. And with components, you only modify the original when you want to modify all of its children. And that might not make sense right now, but let me show you. So if I were to copy this component, copy and paste it, I'm going to just move it. Now I have an instance of the component that I just created. And the way that you can tell that it's an instance is on the left-hand side for your layers, I can see my original component. It has these filled in diamonds, but my instance of the component is an empty diamond. So if I'm looking at my filled in diamond and I'm like, oh, like I could literally copy and paste this component 2 times. Actually, let me do it 3 times to really prove my point. So if I copied and pasted 3 times, and I'm like, I use the thing 3 times, but I want to make it a little bit thinner, but I don't want to go in and change it every time, I could just change it for the original component, and that changes it for every single instance throughout the entire application. So this is extremely beneficial and very helpful to use components. You see how beautiful that is? It literally just moves it based off of what I made the original change off of. So again, I hope it makes sense, but you never touch your original component unless you wanted to modify all of its children components. And this is very beneficial to use when you're replicating the same exact button style on every single page, and maybe you realize, oh, I wish it was a little bit bigger. You don't want to go back every single time you use that same thing and update it every single time over and over and over to make it look prettier. You only want to have to do it one time, and in order to do that, you use components. Okay, I have one last thing. It looks like some of you guys are realizing this already, but something I also wanted to show you is how easy it is to integrate images into Figma. So I'm going to stop sharing for this because my pretty pictures are in my trash can right now, and I kind of don't want you guys to see my desktop. So I'm going to, what you guys can do while I'm doing this is find any picture you like and put it on your desktop. Oh yeah, to undo something being a component, you would just right click and you would say detach instance. It's basically undoing the component. So there's always a way to undo your grouping. There's a way to undo your components. You can always bring it back to quote unquote normal whenever you want. Can we change instances? Changing instances, you can, but it's a little difficult. Like there's a lot that goes into it. That's like a little bit more advanced Figma, honestly. Like you wouldn't need to do that for this project, but I would look a lot into components and instances if you're very interested in them. When you change oh, it's so in-depth, but when you like change instances, it's typically when you have like a library of components and you want to change the instance of the component that you're looking at. All of your components are named, so you would change your instance to one of the components that you've named. It's a whole thing. I want a cute picture, like a picture of a deer. Hold on. Let's see. Oh, I know what I'll do. So yeah, while I'm doing this, oh my God. While I'm doing this, feel free to find whatever picture you would like and put it on your desktop. And this is so I can show you guys how easy it is to put in pictures into your Figma. You know, I think some of you guys already know. Okay, so I'm just going here. Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen again. So hopefully you guys can see this. But this is our Figma. And if I make this a little bit smaller, yeah, this is our Figma. I have this picture of a deer. It says deer.jpg. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag it and paste it onto my design. And I'm going to just make my screen a little bit bigger. And now I have a beautiful photo of a deer. Again, this is a great thing to keep in mind. You do not want to use moving, especially when you're messing with pictures, because you're just ruining the dimensions of it. You want to switch to scale. So don't forget that. When you want to keep the dimensions of your image, you switch to scale. But this is a beautiful photo of a beautiful deer, and now you have something as beautiful as a photo in your designs. This is very beneficial when you're doing your hi-fis, when you want real people's photos for the icons on your hi-fi designs, or when you're doing maps, you want to use a real photo for these things, you know. So this is very beneficial, especially when you're doing hi-fi. Lo-fi, not so much, but for hi-fi, it looks very pretty when you have real photos integrated on it. And it's literally as simple as taking something from your desktop and dragging and pasting it onto your homepage. Sorry, not homepage, onto your Figma. And I think, I feel like there's something else I wanted to say, but oh, prototyping. Okay, so that's the last thing that we can go over. For prototyping, it seems very daunting, but I swear to you, the second that you do it once, you know how to do it for everything. So something that I'm actually gonna do is I'm just gonna make a new frame, and instead it's gonna be a desktop frame, so a MacBook, and maybe I'll like, what do people do on MacBooks? They'll like have a picture to the right hand side, and then they'll have like a text box, and it's like welcome, and then they'll have like another like rectangle. Oh wait, before I leave, I also want to show you guys something else. So they have like these two divs where maybe you like divs, and then you like log in with this or something like that. So instead of having these like straight square edges, maybe I want them to have rounded edges. That's something that you can modify at the top right here where you see these X, Y, W, H values, where you can modify the X, Y positioning on the entire screen itself, the width of the height of your element. You can modify the angle of it, and you can modify the corner radius. So the numbers that I always go by default is 60, just because I think that's a little bit cooler. But you can make these literally whatever you want. So again, it's modifying your corner radius. You can make it whatever you want. You could say 2 if you wanted to. It gives a very slight rounded edge. Or you could just say 70 or something like that. And you could do the same thing for these two divs here. You could say 70, and all of a sudden it gives it really nice rounded edges. If I want it to be really extra, I could give it like an effect of a drop shadow. And it, oh, also when you click that sun on drop shadow, you can customize the XY dimensions of your drop shadow and the color of it. So if I wanted to have like a red drop shadow, I could do that. And I could make the like the Y value a little bit higher, things like that. Maybe blur it out a little bit more. So yeah, I could be really extra if I wanted to. But anyway, I'm showing you guys prototypes. So if I were to have this screen, I'm going to copy and paste it and have this new one. And on this new one, I'm going to say hello. And instead, this will just be long and down there and there. So right now I have two screens. How do I tell Figma, if I click this first button right here, go to this screen? How do I tell it to do that? It's prototyping. So what you would do is on the right-hand side where you see design, you would click prototype. That's fine. And now when you hover over any elements, instead of the regular square you have around it, it has a highlight around it, but it also has this circle in the middle. There's a circle, there's a circle. It even does it with text. There's a circle. And it also does it with screens. There's a circle at the end. You have to like, it's so dumb. But anyway, so say for example, if this user clicks this top box, I want it to take them to this entire page. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click and drag to just go to that screen. Now I have a pop-up that shows up that says interaction details. It says on tap, navigate to whatever the name of the screen is. I don't want it to do this on tap. I want it to do this maybe while hovering. So if they're hovering this, I want it to take them to that page. And then it literally just says navigate to, which is the action. And then it says the final page, which is literally all of the layers that we have. But this one is called MacBook 2, which is correct. I wanted to do exactly that. Now you can kind of see that I've set up this flow and it names it accordingly. It says this flow 2. In order for me to see this flow in action, all I have to do is press this play button, which is on the right-hand side of the share button at the top. And it's basically saying present. So actually, first thing you want to do is highlight the starting frame that you're looking at, and then you can click play. When I go to click play, it opens up a new tab, which is where I'm going to be able to play my prototype that I just created. Hopefully it doesn't do all of yours now that I'm thinking about it. It might do everybody's. Let's see. Oh no, it only does mine because mine is flow. Oh, also, wait, hold on, sorry. On the prototype, I think it was doing show prototype sets. It's doing a phone. I don't know why. I don't want it to do any. Sorry. Okay, so now it doesn't do any. But you can kind of see now that I've hovered over this, it takes me to the next thing. If I hover over it, it takes me to the next thing. It literally is listening to exactly what I told it to do. Now, keep in mind, because this is something I forget all the time, when you're in prototype, it's very hard to design when you're in prototype. So please don't forget to switch back to design when you're trying to add frames and rectangles and text and all of this stuff. Only switch to prototype when you're trying to create your flows and actions. Another example of a flow that you could do, if you want on click for this bottom one to take it to the next screen, you're going to click and drag to where you want it to go. And then it would say literally on click, it would go there. Navigate to, or you could have it go back, you could have it scroll to, all of these different things. The simplest one is navigate to, which is ideally what you guys would be doing for yours anyway. So that is how you create prototypes, and it's very easy to do. I swear it's very easy. The moment that you do them, you know exactly what you're doing because it's the same thing for every single instance. Say, for example, you don't want it to go to this entire screen. You want it to specifically take you like, well, it will go to this entire screen anyway because this element exists within the screen. But if I were to like move this out or something, then I would say, okay, if I click this, I want it to go to this div. It won't do that. Interesting. I actually never do that. Anyway, so yeah, it looks like most of the things interact within frames, which makes sense because when users are interacting with your application, they're existing within the frame of their phone or within the frame of their website or desktop application. So all of those things. And I think the last thing that I want to say is these left and right panels, in my opinion, piss me off sometimes because they're very big and you can't customize how big they are, especially when you're working really closely in something. It's just so bothersome. So you can hide them. On a Mac, the shortcut is Command and it's backslash, and it kind of just removes them for you. And to bring them back, it's the same thing. But not gonna lie, I don't know what it is on Windows. It's probably just Control and backslash, and it will remove them for you. But on Mac, it's Command backslash, and it kind of moves them out of your way, so you don't have to stare at them the entire time. And you can just hit that command again once you want to bring something else in. Okay, I think, oh, and then to kind of prove my point with pages from the beginning, you can kind of see we did all of this work on this lo-fi page. If I were to go to the hi-fi page, there's nothing because it's a brand new page. I can literally make whatever I want. So this allows me to make all of my hi-fi, lo-fi designs on this one page. And on my hi-fi, I only have all of the designs that are on my hi-fi page. And I'm glad that people were commenting as well because it does tell you when people leave comments. You can kind of see all of this information here. Yeah, so you can see all of the comments that people left, and it also shows you where the comments are. So you can very quickly just click, go to them, and then respond and be like, oh my God, you know. So yeah, okay, that's pretty much it for this Figma interactive session. I am going to delete this file once this meeting is over, so don't try it. Don't think you can stay on here and do whatever. But I do encourage you to do whatever you like on your own. If you are thinking about making Figma designs for your project, I would say please do it. You're going to be more than happy. And again, if you aren't able to have a final end product, go back to your designs and see if you can implement some prototypes for them. And it would still be worth submitting. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. Literally anything. It can be about design handoff in industry. Can you go over how to get the rectangles? Let's see. Rectangles to adjust at the same time before. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so components. Let me do that one more time. Components are the most difficult part. Where do we find the recordings of these presentations? They're going to be posted all to our YouTube. If you just go to YouTube and type in Night Hacks, all of our workshop videos are on there. And we're going to upload all of the these hackathon workshops on there as well. But let me do components for you guys one more time because it is frustratingly difficult. I'm sorry about that. But this is kind of how they work. So let me get off of comments. Let's say I have this rectangle and I want it to be, I don't know, purple, yellow. No. Oh, these are really bad. It looks like mustard. Mustard's disgusting, by the way. Okay, so I'm gonna click, I won't do the shorthand. I'll just do if you right click on the component and then you select create component, it makes a new component for you. And what you want to do is create instances of that component. You always want to, actually what's a good practice thing to do is having a separate page for all of your components. So you intentionally do not modify your parent component because again, you do not want to modify your parent component unless you're trying to modify all of your children component. But you have your parent component, you're going to copy and paste it. that creates an instance of your component. And now whenever you change your parent component, it will change the instance of your child component everywhere it exists. So you could literally have like 3 copies of this. And if you were to change the color, for example, it would change the color of all of them. If you were to change the dimensions, it would change the dimensions of all of them. So that's kind of how you create components, and it can be reflected everywhere your children are being used. Yeah, I can show you something I've designed on Figma. Oh, wait a second. The entirety of the club website, which is club.nighthacks.ucf. Oh, sorry, not that. .org. My front-end team did that on Figma. Not really my work though. I led my team to do it. And then a lot of the register page on the entire register page and the entire schedule page on the hackathon website is something I made in Figma. And maybe I'm debating if I show you guys like my my senior design project. Let's see. What can I? Oh, this is a fun thing I could show. No, I'm not going to show you, Kenneth. Is it hard trying to turn Figma prototypes from UX designers into actual coders and engineers? Yeah, it's really hard. But the thing is, the reason why it's hard, and you guys are free to leave, by the way, because I know it's like 1 a.m. now. I'm gonna show you guys something. I'm not gonna show you my senior design stuff. But the reason why it's hard is because, well, here's the thing. In industry, it's not that difficult because these designers understand the dimensions of what they're designing for. But when you're doing it for like clubs and like personal projects and things like that, and you're designing something with the hopes that an engineer can implement it, you really don't realize the small pitfalls that people fall into, especially with engineering. And a great example was actually when our design team finished making their hi-fi designs for the club hackathon website, and I had to lead my front-end team into implementing it. There were a couple of snags where we were like, we can't actually do this. Something that they did want to exist was on the left-hand side, there would be the menu icon, and on the right-hand side, there would be the volume icon. But if you guys look at the hackathon site right now, it's always been like this. We had to have the icons both on the left-hand side. And the reason for that is because naturally, naturally on websites, the volume icon, we wanted it to be on the left-hand side because we wanted all of the icons to be on the left-hand side. So visually, it looks very nice for it to be on 2 separate sides, but realistically, on an engineering perspective, it should be on the left-hand side because you want the functionality of your website to all be within one central place. So that's an example of where it's like, you guys gave us something, but we can't implement it. We can't do something with this. And I would say it's not that difficult in our scenario, but it does get very difficult when it's high level stuff and you're given something as an engineer and your designers are like, okay, make it. And you're like, we can't do that, girl, like that. We can't do that. It's not that simple and it's not that easy to just implement the way that you want it to be. So actually, I know what I'll show you. So this is something that I designed on Figma. I did this for, that's like the struggle between architect. Yeah, it's like you're speaking the same language, but like you really, what designers think of first is what looks good, and what engineers think of first is how does it work, which is why you're kind of winning if you're falling into the pool of both. If you know how to do both design and engineering, then you're immediately able to realize, yeah, this is beautiful, but it would look trash if I were to implement this. So yeah, you kind of know what you're doing a little bit more. And become a UX engineer. Yeah, that's actually my dream job is UI developer. Anyways, so this is something that I did last year for my Proust class with Lineker. Shout out to you guys that are suffering with Lineker right now. I understand your pain. But this was actually my first time kind of like, I was the sole designer in the team. And it was my first time like seeing what they liked, and I actually am really happy with how we mapped this out because I had my teammates give me inspiration for what they wanted the site to look like and what they liked and the requirements of the website. So this is all inspo. And then you can kind of see how we started coming up with a lo-fi sort of. And this is when, I haven't looked at this in so long. And I like left comments and stuff like that. And you can kind of see the different screens. I wish I named these better instead of homepage, blah, 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 but that's fine. So this was kind of like my lo-fi quote unquote. And I remember, and then I had like a series of different color schemes that we were looking at and the different typography that we wanted to go with. We ended up going with this bottom one right here. I remember it. And then I ended up making some templates. So these were like the first iterations, and then these were the finals. So like our register pages would look like this, and it would look like that. I'm pretty sure these are not prototyped though, but I made all of these. Yeah, and it kind of looks like this. And then the final, you can kind of see some minor iterations. And then on the final designs, it looked like this for the register page. This is obviously not that great now that I'm looking back at it. And then this is the register page. And then this ended up being our final. And it was actually a lot of fun implementing this. I did it with a guy named Richard. And it says Richard because Richard Lineker. Yeah, and then the actions. Oh, and these are named a little bit better too, info/edit. So here's an example of something I did. I did this last fall. Yeah, okay. I really like the front end. Yeah, I made the designs for everything. I made the designs for everything here. I was the only designer on the team, so they kind of let me do whatever I wanted. I'm gonna add you on LinkedIn. Sure, that's so sweet. Yeah, I'd love to add you back. Okay, so yeah, that's literally it. You guys can feel free to leave. It's okay. But if you have any Figma specific questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. And if you want to know even more about Figma, there's so many videos online. Bye, Victoria. There's so many videos online about it, and you'll be able to find everything. You're welcome, hon. So yeah, just don't be scared of it. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know design, and like they don't even try, but you interact with applications every day. Like you know what you like. Like you've definitely been on a website and you're like, oh, that's trash. Like when you, never mind. Like when you go to some of these UCF professors' websites and you're like, wow, like you know how to make a better website than just that. Did you learn how to do the register page design stuff from video? No. To be fair, some part of design is intrinsic. Like you simply just know how to make designs look pretty. Okay, here's how you can go about it. Because some people are genuinely like, I don't know how to design and I don't have a design bone in my body, then try designing what you think looks good. That's kind of how I approach design anyway, is I design something that I think looks pretty and I think looks appealing. And another thing, I didn't take anything from online, but something that I do enjoy doing is looking at inspiration from other people anyway. Like that's kind of what I had my teammates do. I was like, what do you guys think looks good? So that I can kind of get an idea of what kind of layouts you guys like and what you enjoy looking at. So I know how to frame these designs in a way that you guys would also think is appealing. So never hesitate to look on sites like Dribbble and Behance. Those are always great ones. I really love Dribbble, especially for inspiration on how to design things. But I would say I didn't learn anything from these sites. I kind of just learned by doing, which in my opinion is the best way to learn. And I would say do that as well. But if you're feeling stumped, look at some inspiration and think about what you would like to see in your application and what you enjoy seeing in design and try implementing that. Are you able to take a design straight from Figma and implement it, or is it strictly for design only? So I know that Figma actually has a feature where you can like convert it into CSS, but I never do that. But that's just because I know how to code. And I actually wish I had enough time to go over this, but the way that you really go from design to implementation, design handoff literally, the answer is with UI component libraries. So when you're working on a website, for example, and you know the tech stack that you're using or the framework that you're using, if you're using React.js or Vue or what's the one that starts with an A? Or Angular, don't use Angular, please. But if you're using any of those, you could literally just Google the framework and then UI component libraries afterwards. And you will find all of these libraries that literally have the components like buttons and accordions and cards that you made in your design that you can implement into actual code. So that's kind of how you go from design into code is with UI component libraries. They're component libraries that exist out in the world that literally are just they're literally components that you put into your code. I'm a computer science major. Yeah. Any more questions? Don't forget to fill out the form, the type form. Yeah, of course, Jake. And I hope you guys have fun with your hackathon projects. I'm curious how many of you guys are starting. Have a good one, Pedro. But yeah. Hope it's going well. And if not, I hope recruiting is going well and these workshops are going well. Even if you don't end up with anything at the end of the hackathon, that's okay. At least you had fun. And at least you learned something that you can take away with you. And I wish I mentioned this earlier, but playing with Figma allows you to put Figma on your resume. And people really love knowing that they're working with engineers who understand design and understand UI UX. So it's always a plus to have something like this under your skills. Probably would do some mock-up prototypes. Yeah, that'd be so fun. You can do it on both Android and iPhone if you want to, but honestly, phones are so malleable that if you make a design on just Android, you're going to be able to implement it on the iPhone anyway. So you wouldn't need to. And I would also say the dimensions for phones are so similar, it would almost be redundant to make the styles on both Android and phone. If you're going to do that, I would say pick two drastically different dimensions. So one iPhone style that's very clearly not the same as an Android style to show how your designs would look different on two different dimensions. So I would say you don't have to, but if you want to, you can. But if they look very similar, don't waste your time. It's okay. It's a phone. They all look the same. It's all right. Yeah. Also, my word is not God. Like, please, look up things. I should have said this at the beginning, but this is my opinion. You know that this is my opinion. Yeah, that's me. That's me right now. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. Feel free to ask me any more questions if y'all got any. So it's also our job to translate the UI libraries. Yeah, Figma, it does have a feature for translating to CSS, but I don't know how to use it, and I personally I don't like doing that with design libraries because I would rather just code the way I know how to code. But it's very beneficial for you to learn about UI libraries and know how to implement them because everybody uses them. In the industry, everybody uses them. Mhm. And actually, okay, I'm rambling at this point, but another thing that happens in industry is we have things like Bootstrap, which is like a CSS component library, and Tailwind CSS, which I love with my entire heart, and Material UI, which is very popular for React.js. But what companies will actually do is they'll create their own UI component libraries internally, and they use their own components. And a lot of times, these things are made on sites like Figma and Adobe XD and sites like that, where you literally can create your own components from scratch. That's what these designers at these high level companies are doing. And that's because every company has their own branding. They don't want to take from, the standard libraries, but it is never a bad idea to do that. If you're just building a simple website, it's very unnoticeable, especially when you customize the components to be exactly how you want it to look. But yeah, it's your job. It's a good job to have, for sure. Okay, have a good night, guys. And I think these were the last workshops of the night. So go ahead and work with your team a little and go to sleep. And we'll see y'all tomorrow. Bye.